in our literacy centers that were in person. So we have 15 different physical literacy centers and over 30 literacy sites with a broad range of services. And what we came up with in less than a week, because that was the only time that we felt that we can disrupt learning, we came up with this range of services. For ESL classes, we have from our basic all the way up to our advanced, a TOEFL class, citizenship, conversational English, a whole bunch of one-on-one tutoring sessions through WebEx and Zoom, what we call our success and empowerment groups, which we'll get to a little bit later, a health literacy class featuring COVID-19 safety practices, our ABE program we call Expressways to Success, that was active and continues to be so, a weekly jobs class, a digital literacy class that focuses on computer skills using a mobile app called Learning Upgrade, which is incredible, and a parent literacy class to help parents to be more confident and capable first teachers of their children, particularly if they're teaching from home virtually. So we have that 2 sessions a week, and a writing class that can support those with writing ambitions. All of that pulled into place virtually. Now we know one thing, is you can build all of this wonderful place to learn, but if you do not create a pathway for learners to connect, more than likely, you're going to find that there's not that many. And we were able to build a pathway so that 200 of our learners were able to engage in learning, and we are committed to making sure that everyone can learn. So what we're going to do during the course of this time is to talk about some practical ways that you can do similar and possibly even better things in terms of building a navigation system that works. So we're going to talk about how to build the navigation capacity within your program to address the digital divide. You probably have a system of supports, but is it specifically aligned to remove barriers that are unique to the digital divide? And if you don't have a navigation system of supports, we want to try to give you some ideas of how you can start, because whether you're out in the middle of nowhere, tutoring out of a one-room church, which we do actually have that, or if you're a fully functional and capacity adult education provider, you can build a navigation system and continue to build it over time. We want to talk about how to address the technical barriers that are inherent to the digital divide, of which that's mostly the technology, and it's probably the most apparent ones. The other 2 barriers are the instructional barriers. So you have this great infrastructure for virtual learning, but maybe you might not have instructors and volunteers who are confident, or learners who are confident enough to engage. And how to address what we call the engagement barriers. And those are the things that are non-technical. It's all about your comfort level as a learner, your comfort level as an instructor. Are we looking at the person as opposed to looking at the technology? In other words, you have to get past the technology for learning to happen. And if you're not specifically looking at those barriers, you might find that there's quite a few people who are going to set it out. And finally, how to establish one of our key strategies for bridging the digital divide, what we call our laptop loaning program. So if we go through these things in the short amount of time that we have, I will feel that we've had a successful conversation. So the first thing is, we know what the digital divide is, but oftentimes it might not be applied specifically to the adult learner first. I'm sure if you go back and think about what was happening in March, they were talking about, oh, the kids are not going to be in school. That was the big discussion, is what's happening with the kids. And then there was another discussion that was equally fervent, and that was all the college students who are now going to have to be studying virtually, which they have a pretty substantial way of doing that already. But there wasn't as much of a focus on the adult learners and adult eds. That was somewhat missing from a lot of the investment and missing from some of the policy discussion. And when we're talking about that digital divide, we're talking about that uneven distribution of access to these informational and digital assets, or use of these assets, or even the ability to do so. And I was finding, at least in our community in Kalamazoo, Michigan, that there wasn't really that much discussion of the adult learner. How are we missing that particular learner, and what is the negative impacts on our community? So keep that in mind. The digital divide, it certainly is talking about distinct groups, but go back and think, was the adult learner in your community, not within your agency, but in your community, was the adult learner central or a part of that conversation in terms of how your community was going to embrace it? I believe that they should be. So much so that we formed a task force. I said, we can't do this by ourselves. At the Literacy Council, if you know anything about literacy councils, they typically are volunteer-led, and sometimes they have staff. but we can't do this work by ourselves. We wanted to put together a group of people who can say we want to build a comprehensive system to support the virtual needs of adult learners and put the adult learners central into that conversation. And we didn't want to talk about what a literacy council could do. We wanted to see what an agency can do. And as far as the capacity, we were looking at, do we have the proper digital devices, learning platforms, training, supports, partners, and policies to build a comprehensive system to help us weather this unprecedented pandemic? And in doing so, these partners that came together, and there were about 20 of them across multiple disciplines, they came up with recommendations that we used as the mandate for requesting support and as a guidance for how we would actually deploy that support. First recommendation was in the obvious area. You have to remove the technical barriers. That's the software, hardware, the internet, those types of accessibility issues. That was pretty clear. Second was removing those instructional barriers. In other words, if you have all this technology, but you don't have a range of academic options that are consistent with what your learners need, it's still not enough. And if they're not available when your learners are needed, still not enough. And if you have instructors who are awesome in their in-person instruction, but hesitant in their virtual instruction, still not enough. So we wanted to make sure that we were removing barriers to make sure that learning can still happen in a quality fashion once we transition to virtual. And I know that every program and every person on this call has gone through a similar experience. We just needed to organize it so that people would pay attention. And the last one was the one that is oftentimes not as much talked about, especially in the beginning, was looking at those engagement barriers. That even though you have wonderful classes and instructors ready to teach, and you have all these software and hardware and all these things in place, you still have hesitancy from many to want to engage in this type of work. So are you building a systems of supports to support the social and emotional well-being of learners that build enough trust and remove enough distractions so that they can be present enough to learn and have the coping skills to persist in this somewhat different and challenging virtual learning environment? And we have some tips for each three of these areas, and I'm hoping to pass them along to you and answer questions about how you might be able to modify them for your unique use. So within the technical barriers, I'm going to give you a couple of tips, and hopefully you can put them into place. First, establish some kind of criteria for how you're going to use the existing and loaned digital devices that will be available to your adult learner. Well, what we have by existing is we found that we were tutoring across multiple sites, teaching across multiple sites, but all those computer labs that had laptops in them, they were sitting there dormant. So we had to look at, well, what can we do with these dormant laptops to bring them into service? And what kind of laptops are helpful? We had a lot of them that didn't have cameras, so people wanted to donate laptops that didn't have cameras. That was not going to be useful to us, and some of them were not necessarily the right type of model that was conducive for virtual learning. But we also found that there were places that did have those. And if you can articulate what you need to your community, they might be able to loan them, donate them, or you might have them in computer labs that are no longer in use. I don't care what anyone says, when we were looking at this virtual learning, we immediately knew that there was going to be the need to have a very robust amount of digital devices that are available. We also had to look at what our learners had in their homes. And there's a broad range of things, from Macs to Samsung tablets, to the laptops that we provide, and to their desktops that they have. Knowing what they are and establishing what works and what doesn't work early saves you a lot of strife, because we were finding out that people say, yeah, I have a desktop with no camera and outdated software, which made it so that we really weren't able to connect those learners. So establishing that criteria and making it clear to your community, they can help you, donating the right laptops instead of the wrong, and donating the right to expertise instead of expertise that may not be as helpful. When you get to purchasing, if you have the opportunity to purchase new devices, purchase similar, if not exact models. What that does is that limits the type of IT questions that you have, because one model is going to have a similar problem with it, as opposed to if you buy 15 different models, you're probably going to have an infinite number of a variety of IT requests. And if you're working with anyone who knows anything about IT, they're going to ask you very specific types of questions, and we want to be able to give them very specific knowledge. So what we did is, as we were building this system, we were intentionally trying to break it. You know, what happens when you sign on too many people? What happens when you use this model versus that? And when there was an IT problem, we listed it. And that's who we went to for free, our local IT specialist at our library, to say, we have these predictable problems. These are the type of error messages. And can you help us for free to be able to do that? It also helps you to be able to maintain your own fleet with a lot less variety in terms of what you need to know. In our case, so all we need to know is, does that hotspot work with that laptop? And can you click on these icons to get you into your classes? Because they're all the same instead of all these different things. And then make sure that you have visual guides for every digital device that's used. We have them for tablets, for our laptops, for Macintosh, for cell phones. As we encounter a new device, we want to make sure that we have a way of talking about it with our learners so that they don't have to read a very complex manual. Most of the time is what you have as far as your industry manuals. They're overly complex for us. So imagine for a learner who may have limited language ability, giving them the same manuals don't make that much sense. We create visual guides, and we'll show you what one sample one looks like. And I'm sure you've seen some of these, but we're going to try to give you some better practices so that you can get better results. So going back to this laptop loaning program, we felt that when the pandemic hit, that we were the essential service. And just like everyone else, I mean, a lot of times it was the food pantries and housing and transportation and unemployment applications. We raised our hand early when our community was making this response. And I applied for a small grant, and for us it was small, to our United Way. And they said, sure, based off of what you said, since you're going to be providing essential services, we'll give you a little bit of support to help you to build this laptop loaning program. Our case was, we can help learners to complete unemployment applications. We still do that, and it's all virtual now. We can help connect learners to other community resources that are all virtual. So if you can do this, you should unapologetically ask for resources to help you to be able to do this. We were providing information on how to complete the 2020 census. This was our case. And we said, ultimately, we're also going to connect them to the classes and tutoring services that were provided. But we had to make ourselves important to the bigger discussion before they cared about connecting people to GED classes or ESL classes. So in making that case, they said, sure, here's some seed funds for that, but it also focused attention on our adult learners in ways that they had not been focused on before. With that, with the borrowed computers and the existing computers and the few that we purchased, we established a fleet of 45 laptops, and we were able to get all those 200 learners into service through just this creation of this program. So the key thing is to remember that you are an essential service and be unapologetic in asking for what you need to be able to provide your essential service, and what other services can you provide with whatever you're requesting. In this case, it was laptops, and we also requested some funding for some hotspots because many of our places, particularly our rural communities, didn't have access to stable internet in some of our homes. So how do you get the learners to engage in this? Postcards were mailed to every enrolled learner. We said we were not going to be able to get a hold of them all, but we're going to send them all and make sure that we have a relentless pursuit of them to let them know we are here, help is on the way, and learning does not end for you simply because COVID-19 hit. Phone calls were made to every enrolled learner, every single one. We called them all. And we had a lot to call. And for those who needed technical assistance, which was all of them, a separate phone call was scheduled to walk the learner through the process of how to connect to your schedule. So we created the schedule, we sent it to them and said, here's what you can do to connect. And we scheduled calls for every learner who wanted to get enrolled. So that's over 200 people. We had our laptop loaning program, and when they get those devices from us, they also get a letter with them. So they get this package, and then there's a letter, and our navigator, whoever's one's there, we have a picture of them and says, I will call you soon. And they're still apprehensive, but this is the one selling point that got our learners to lean in instead of run away. We will help you every step of the way. Now, if you have someone, even if they're not a paid staff, it could be a volunteer, it could be an IT specialist, but if they make that commitment to be with the learner every step of the way, from the time they pick up a digital device to the time that they actually make their first virtual call, that has been the one sales point that has helped our learners to become confident enough to want to stick with us. And our navigators, they do a really good job of inspiring that type of confidence. So They also are given a visual guide of the device that they're given, and this is just the one that we use. It's been updated a little bit because as we learn more, we update our guides to be able to be better at it. First, we made sure that there was a common password across all devices. Now, I know some IT specialists for security purposes are saying, no, you have to have all these specialized passwords. In this case, no, you don't, because that creates a new barrier for you, because now you have to memorize passwords instead of just knowing that everyone has the same password across multiple items. What we're doing is not a security risk, it's an access issue. We use that common password. We have a consistent naming convention. And for us, this is what we use. You come up with one, as long as it's consistent, doesn't matter. So when you want to have a username, in our case, it was first initial, last name, and the 6 digits of your birth date. If you know that, even if your learner doesn't know what their username is, you do if you know their first name, last name, and their birth date. And we use Team Viewer. It's free and it's awesome. So when you get stuck or your learner gets stuck in following directions, if you have Team Viewer downloaded on that device, you can actually take over the device and say, here, let me set up the configuration on your laptop. So we downloaded those on all the new purchased ones and all the ones that we brought in from our dormant computer labs, and any device that we can, we set it up in this fashion. Second, and this is the actual screenshot of what's on their desktop, that reverse L you see up on every screen, on every laptop, it looks exactly the same. So we know beforehand, we're going to say, well, you're going to have a Zoom meeting, and that's where the Zoom icon is, or WebEx, or whatever. They know where it is. And we make sure that we have a consistent setup on every desktop that we have. If you have variety, you have challenges, because you'll say, look up in the upper left, and they say, I don't see anything. They should see the same thing, and you should put what you use most commonly up on those icons. The person who does this for us for free is a college student who is studying computer science engineering, and anytime we have a laptop donated to us, we give it to him, and he configures it in this fashion for free. He's also my son, and I love him very much. We make sure that we give them prompts. So this is the next page, and we explain everything. And this part, getting onto the Wi-Fi, requires the most patience. So we're talking them through it. It's usually by phone call, and it ends with them being able to see each other on their first Zoom or WebEx call. I call it that hallelujah dance that they have at the end. Happy hallelujah, we can see each other. We explain every icon, every single one. So this is a conversation you have on the phone. Turn the page. We're going to talk about everything that you're using and the ones that you're going to be using first, which ends up being usually WebEx for us or Zoom. And make sure you explain every icon, because we don't want to leave any questions that are unanswered. We have them join their first class. And remember, they're doing this on the screen, they're on the page and on the phone. And they join their first meeting, and make sure that the visual guide has every exact step. Don't skip them. If you skip them, then you lose them. They say, wait a minute, I don't know what I'm doing. Say, hold on, turn to page whatever, and they can follow along. Remember that promise? We will be with you every step of the way. This is how you are with them every step of the way. And finally, they're almost there. And this is the preview screen. You tell them what it is and that they're on the title. And sometimes before we had this, they thought they were in the class before they were in the class. This is just the preview screen. Make sure you follow those exact steps. And once they get in here, you explain all of the buttons and features. And this is usually done not right before class. This is done as a practice session before class. Explain every button that they're going to use, and then practice with the learner. And once they can do this independently, you now know that your learners can sign in for the most part without having all of those technical questions. That practice part is very important, and we spend a lot of time training volunteers. Just have a practice WebEx call or a practice Zoom call with learners to get them to be more proficient. I'm not making all these scratches, so that's not me.
Okay. I do have one question. I'll figure out how to get that off there. Oh, there they go.
I was thinking, that wasn't me.
I didn't do it. Somebody asked, are those icons, are you locking them on the desktop so students can't move them around?
No, we didn't lock them, but we certainly didn't encourage people to move them around. Now, it might be something that we do later, is to lock it in that fashion. But there was no special step. We just made sure that when you received the laptop from us, that was the condition that you received it in. But that might be a good tip. Can we lock those down? I'll ask my son. Is there value in doing that? Probably. Was it an extra step that we didn't do? Yep, we didn't do it. And we've been successful up to this point, but I'll keep that in mind.
Okay, thanks.
So you have your learners and you're practicing with them, but they have to connect to something. First, we have to create opportunities for our instructors and students to learn how to teach and learn in the virtual environment. And if you don't create those, you're just going to have a schedule and there's going to be awkward on both sides. Tutors who can't share screens, learners who don't know how to function virtually. So you have to create those opportunities. They don't create themselves. Train instructors and tutors in the 7 skills to be a proficient virtual tutor. We limited it to 7. I was trying to get it to 5, but they said, no, there's 2 more skills, and we'll show you some of those as well. Digitize common learning texts, and make sure when you're doing that, that you observe copyrights restrictions. Now, we work very closely with New Readers Press. We explain the situation to them that we're still purchasing books and sending them to them, but instead of awkwardly holding up books to the camera, we wanted to digitize them and make them into PDFs, because tutors and instructors want to use what they were using. They don't want to be told, well, everything you were doing is obsolete, and now you're going to have to use this virtual learning program as opposed to the curriculum series that you're familiar with. So we got some volunteers to scan in the text that we were normally using, and we showed them how to use it. So they can keep on tutoring, it's just in a virtual environment instead. That familiarity got some of our volunteers off the bench because they didn't want to go and start learning how to be Burlington English tutors. They wanted to continue in Challenger 4, Lesson 1. And if you're a volunteer who teaches tutoring, you know what that is. Supports for tutors and learners looks something like this. Every other week, and next week is on Tuesday from 2 o'clock to 3 o'clock, we have our volunteer tutor checkup. And these are where our volunteers, they sign on for their WebEx calls and they meet with their peers and with our navigators to learn how to be a better virtual tutor. It's fun, it's social, and they also get a chance to be able to learn the good, the bad, and the ugly about virtual tutoring from each other first and also from us. If you do not create a gathering point, you will have to have 200 conversations to reach 200 people. But if you create these places where they can come and learn with each other, you have a managed place where you can impart skill to get them ready for virtual tutoring. And you can, if you find one of your volunteers who's kind of the trusted volunteer tutor, in our case, we have one in particular, we said if she can do it, all of you can do it. And she says, I can do it. So she was able to get them into the game of tutoring. Same thing with our learners. We call them success groups, but basically these are empowerment groups to help our learners to be able to persist in virtual learning. We do that in general. When we were doing instruction, if it was in person, we had empowerment groups, but we knew we needed to have a virtual space to do that. So these are activities where they have a weekly support group. In our case, we have for free a college student from the Western Michigan University School of Social Work. She's an MSW candidate leading these weekly support groups. We also do social activities. The person you see on the screen, his name is Jay. He's one of our volunteer tutors. He's an 80-year-old who just celebrated his 80-year-old birthday, and he was in his assisted living or place, and they said, okay, let's celebrate his birthday. So we had his birthday over a WebEx call. Those balloons came from one of our entrepreneur students. She has a balloon business, and they were delivered by one of our navigators. But in having that celebration, everyone was proficient enough to be able to say, happy birthday, Jay. They could do that. They can probably study with us. So if you create these places where people can become proficient that are away from the academics and you can provide some specific support, now you have ways to be able to support them all. Our person who coordinates all of that is not a tutor, is not an instructor. It's a person who loves marketing. She's our marketing and development coordinator. So if you have a marketing committee, if you don't have a person who's staff, you say, can you put together a calendar and set up all these events that we can get together to support our tutors and learners? If you do that, that's one way to be able to provide that support. So the 7 skills that we say that you need to have, because we're trying to convince people you can do this. 1, you have to be able to locate PDF instruction documents. Remember those digitized things that we said you need to have? They need to know how to access it. They need to know how to get into a WebEx or Zoom call, turn on and off their camera and microphone, share and stop sharing their screen. All the things we're doing on this call, by the way, use the annotate tool, which I haven't used, but if they can do that, they can be a great virtual teacher, and be able to print screen. And this Command P for those who are using PCs. Macintoshes are different. You have 2 buttons. I don't know why, but we had to show them how to do it. and then ultimately be able to attach and email documents. Now, with a finite list, it's a lot easier to convince people that you can do it. And they say, I'm not good at technology. You got on this call, 5 of these things you already know how to do if you're already here. So we actually practiced on printing screens and using the annotate tools during our tutor checkups, and now they're much more proficient. So having a finite list of skills and proving that you as a volunteer, you as an instructor, would help to be able to inspire the confidence necessary to have that faculty confidently teaching virtually. Same thing with our virtual learners, 4 skills instead of 7, almost exactly the same. Click on WebEx or Zoom, turn your camera on and off, receive and send emails. And this one we put in red because you don't need it immediately, but you should be able to save and retrieve documents because I'm sending homework to you and vice versa. And we teach that in our digital literacy class, but we also reinforce that in every class that we teach, as well as our empowerment and success groups. My son was calling me, so I had to look at that. If there's going to be a thing that distracts me, it's family first, but he's okay. Also, you have to have a different way of getting materials to people. So again, this is the infrastructure to provide remove barriers to services. Your learners, if you don't have a drop-off, we had to create a way that we can send them to them. Me and the post office, we get along really well. You have to have a champion for it. In this case, our champion ended up being me. Anybody who knows me, they know I love Darth Vader. So that's what I really look like. And on my off hours, as in after work and on the weekends, I end up becoming the supply chain management person. So all the books, supplies, laptops, they get delivered. We have on Google Docs, a mailing log. So all of our tutors, they request their supplies and we organize them. And I set up weekly mailings. After I get done with this, that's exactly what I'm doing, is taking all of these books, because these are the ones they requested, or some like them, and making sure that they get to where they need to be. And we have donations that are requested as well. Where my son is right now, the Western Michigan University Osher Lifelong Learning Institute, they said, we're going to do a donation drive. And they're providing a lot of those mailing packets and papers and pens and things that we're mailing so that we don't have to spend money on it. And it comes back and I sort it along with a few volunteers, and we have a very clear way of being able to get digital devices, books, and supplies out to people. Now, the one thing I will say is these little whiteboards over here, they are awesome for virtual learning, because if you write on those, you can see a little bit better than writing on pieces of paper. So we had some of those donated, and we also purchased those as well because it improved the learning environment so much more than just having people holding up papers or holding up awkwardly what they wrote in there for homework. I know it's going fast. I tried to get through this in the time that we have. The engagement barriers also take some special attention. Train the people who are connecting with your learners. I don't care if it's the person who handles intake or people who are doing the adult learning plans, but you need to train them in the unique challenges that are inherent to bridging the digital divide. They are different barriers. We already know that many of our learners already have some existing ones, but these are new ones. And if you don't train them and support them and being able to remove them, it's not going to happen. Connect learners to community resources that help remove distractions and address other needs. So when this first happened, a lot of people were laid off. If you are part of the people who are helping them to fill out applications, they're going to say thank you and more than likely want to come to class. And if they still have to do that and they haven't done it, they're not going to come to class anyway. So engage in those necessary services first, or work with those agencies that can do that. Our Michigan Works, we make referrals for them and they can take care of this, or Goodwill Industries. So connect learners to where the resources are and to remove those barriers. That's what our navigators do, and that's what our training is all about. We actually have a structured training on 8 specific strategies to increase retention and remove barriers to learning, and we train on those things. Create those empowerment groups and success groups to give that safe space to learn how to do this and become proficient so that they're much better at it. So here's what our circle of support looks like. Kim Hollers is from a totally different agency, but very close to me. She's actually my fiance. Yeah, she's great. We connect people to what they need, whether it's transportation, health, employment, education, childcare, financial, or housing. If these are barriers that they're experiencing, they're not going to show up. And you already know this. But you need to have someone who can have those conversations and translate those connections to community resources in the digital divide. So there's some additional things in addition to knowing what those community resources are and where they are in the community. Translation services. In our case, we did, since we weren't paying for transportation support, because we provide some of that, we said, well, we need to instead start paying for translation services. And you have 26 different languages, and it's hard to be able to speak about technical things if you're not listening in your native language. So we said, let's do that. We also had some very of our higher level English language learners who served as translators. They said, I would do my part to volunteer my services to help my friends get online. So that's new. Visual guides for everything. I mean, we did it for everything. We just did another one for, it was, what was it? It was Learning Upgrade, the mobile app. We just did it for that because it's a new application that we're using, because we figured we can get more people learning on their phones, because there are more phones than anything when it comes to digital devices, smartphones, that is. Digital devices, make sure you can recruit the right ones and explain how to use them, so it's a different language. Instead of the button to the right, it has to be the right language when it comes to describing how to access those devices. And learning aids such as those whiteboards that we were talking about, and some of the notebooks that we give, we make sure that since you're not in the classroom and we can hand them to you personally, we make sure that what you need at home, we send to you at home. So we used to have things like, yay, we're going to feed our learners because they're hungry during lunchtime. Well, they're not here anymore. So we reallocated our budget to these types of new learning aids. The same thing with translation services. But we've always had people who can talk about these barriers, connect them to a resource that can remove them, but also stay learning with us. And if you don't do that, life will take away the ability for them to focus on you. The biggest barrier that we found in learning has been the digital divide. And adding these visual guides, translation services, digital services, and learning aids, and having a group of people dedicated to using them has helped immensely. So here's some Navigator advice from some people who actually do this on a daily basis. Taylor's our parent literacy navigator. She works with 228 parents who are in our system. Rose is our adult education, our adult learning navigator for our ADE program. And Jackie, she works with our ESL program. Taylor says, share your screen and use Google Translate so they can read what you're saying in their native language. Google Translate free. It's not perfect, but at least you could have that conversation without always stumbling. Add links to their Google calendars so they can get notifications in classes instead of them going, send me the link. Well, it's on their calendar. Have a digital literacy class that sets them up so that they actually have a Google Calendar and they can manage their learning that much more efficiently. Help learners establish peer relationships. This has helped their retention because they feel like they're a tight-knit group and they feel connected to each other. So now they're showing up. I miss my classmates. Well, show up to class or show up to a learning group. That's going to happen. Rose says, call learners who have not yet attended. And we said call. She made over 400 calls and kept on calling to find out, are you okay? We are here to help you. Do you want to learn? And encourage those who are discouraged with technology. She's definitely as saying there's others who are learning, and we know it's hard, but we can get you through it. We will help you every step of the way and follow through on that promise. Jackie says, empower tech-savvy learners to help teach volunteers and the other learners. So peers can help, and they do it for free. Empathize with their struggles and let them know that they are not alone. And what she means by that is she says everyone's struggling, and we know that we can learn and struggle together. And we just admit that vulnerability, and they say, oh, so it's not just me who's struggling? Because I was embarrassed to even try because I thought I was going to fail in public and so on. So empathize with them and allow them to choose the path of least resistance. Let them come to class on their phone if they have to, if the computer's not working. Just take those baby steps. We say, that's good, at least you made the call, we can listen to you. Well, we're going to work with you until we can see you on a clearly made virtual call. This is our huddle board. We borrowed this practice from our local health institution called Bronson Healthcare. It's our hospital, and the continuous improvement specialist, his name is Eduardo Osorio. And I know I probably shouldn't end with anything that looks like data at the end, but every day we consult this. How many learners are we trying to reach? How many calls have we made? And how many tests have we done? And so some of the things that matter to us, we have our operations manager, she runs all of this. As we said, focus your efforts on the things that matter. Our whole goal was to get 200 people attending. Yay, we got 200 people attending. Well, how many are attending today? And we do this every day. And whoever doesn't show up, we call them immediately. to make sure they get connected. How many calls? 408 calls against the 417 that we were trying to make. And we keep track of that to make sure we have reached them all and know what they all can do. Our latest struggle was getting people past the CASAS test. How many CASAS tests? 87. How many got done? 73. How many we want to get done this week? 10. How many got done so far? 7. Now, if you do this, you have a way of being able to organize all of your virtual efforts. We come together in 20 minutes, we have this conversation, and we've been able to produce these outcomes. I have not seen my team all together in one room since March. This is how we see each other, and we talk around this around 20 minutes, and it works. How well? Well, when we first started, it was all about, can we get people on board? So you can see that it's really crinkly green line. It was hard in the beginning, and then we got better at it. And then the semester ended, so it went down. But then we had a 2-week break, and we said, okay, time out. Let's employ everything that we've learned so that we can keep everyone who re-enrolls for the fall and add more new learners. And you can see that since they employed what they learned, they have had a graceful level of increased attendance. That little pink bar is sort of like our Price of Rice range finder. We say if every week we have people who are attending at that level, we're good. And they've been good ever since. And every time we have more people to attend, that bar raises higher. So we have that daily huddle meeting, 20 minutes, weekly case management, where they talk about the more difficult cases to come up with strategies. And then they set monthly goals of how many people we're going to get enrolled, what our retention rates are going to be, and what are we going to do to make sure that we provide enough services to keep them engaged. This is them meeting goal after goal. Every month they've been able to consistently meet their goals, first because they've set it and they've organized their time around it. The phone calls that are made, the number of we call them ALP interview sessions. That's when you talk and reset goals and remove barriers based off of that phone call conversation. They've been able to get that enrollment increasingly toward that 200 goal that we had. So final thoughts about navigation, because I don't want to go over, and I know I'm talking fast. Caring navigators, or people who are in charge of connecting people, can support people and help them to bridge the digital divide, but you have to train them. And it's in those 7 strategies of what an instructor needs: knowing what your community resources are and knowing the digital devices that you're using. Spend some time in training on that. We do that on a weekly basis. We have different learnings that our navigators continue to teach each other on, and we invite IT specialists and others to help us inform the practice. And my kid, he's a computer science engineer. He just continues to drop for free nuggets of knowledge that helps us to be better, as well as our other partners who are much larger in the community, like our largest public school system. They have an effort they call it Digital Access for All, where 1,000 people are being given Chromebooks and laptops and hotspots. So we learned from them how to employ their better practices and also to be able to pull in some of their IT support for free. I keep saying for free because we don't have any extra money. Success in removing barriers requires a community response led by an agency vision. You, as adult education providers, are responsible for articulating what your learners need and then getting your community to care. That's why we did that task force. That's why we joined that larger digital access for all effort. And that's why anytime they mention about learning, I say, but what about the parents at home who are teaching those kids? When they talk about college students being sent home, I said, well, what about the parents who sent those college kids there, or the ones who want to get to college? If you make that happen, the community will respond. And my son, he's just finishing up that donation drive. And from what I see, he says, can you pick up all the donations? We have all the donations on the list. He sounds like that, but better. Set and meet goals. That helps to demonstrate that the difficult is possible with a motivated team and a thoughtful plan. So we set goals and we meet them, and that makes you feel like you're making progress in an incredibly challenging time. Many people didn't think we could do it. And the programs that suffered most were the ones that hunkered down and said, we're going to wait this out. We didn't. And I hope that for those of you who continue to forge ahead, that you set goals, meet goals, and prove that serving learners is possible even in this time. And the rewards come. We have more volunteers who come to us. We're training some new ones this weekend, more donations that come to us. Our annual campaign, we are meeting or exceeding our goals from last year as opposed to the opposite. So it's possible if we work together, and it's possible to be able to remove these barriers with a little bit of a plan and a vision that you're confident in. So hopefully that has given you a pretty good idea of some of the things that can be done, those practical efforts. I'm going to stop sharing my screen so I can see all of you who are still here. Stop share. Questions? It's Elaine.
Thank you, Michael. I really appreciate you sharing everything you're doing in Michigan with all the folks in Ohio today. Outstanding. I'm always impressed. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, thank you. We love partnering with you, and you can see we keep on ordering books and putting them out there.
Well, I just love it. You're making a difference, and I love the laptop learning program. Good job.
Well, thank you very much. That was one of our early solutions, is making sure that the laptops that weren't used were now being used. And we've set up some criteria for it so that it's not as chaotic as it could be. And we have not lost not one laptop or hotspot yet.
That's great. That's wonderful, Michael. Wonderful. Looks like you're getting a lot of responses here.
Well, thank you. I do appreciate the opportunity. I was hoping to be able to learn from some of you about what you're doing, but I know that the work of connecting people to bridge the digital divide is oftentimes complex, but it can be done with focus and patience, lots of patience. Sometimes
Yes,
there's
a lot of
tears involved. Sometimes there's tears involved, I can tell you that.
Oh, we got some folks asking about your presentation, Michael.
Yes, I will make it available wherever I'm supposed to put it. And someone wants to have the laptop learning and loaning contract, I will make sure that that's included as well.
Oh, so nice. Wonderful.
Yeah, that's the thing, especially when you're doing this as a community project, like digitizing things, find out who's doing one part so you don't have to do what they did. So we share what we did with other partners. We say, you guys do this part, we do that part. And now we have a library of digitized text that we use in common. We figured out CASAS together. That was fun. TABE we did. That was also fun. You know, do it as a community project instead of doing it by yourself. And invite those people who are saying, I don't ever want to tutor. I said, but can you do IT? Sure. And don't give me an invoice. They do it for free. Just ask.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Are you monitoring your chat, or is I didn't know if Emily or someone else?
No, Emily was doing that because I told
I'm
her.
on here. Yeah, thank you,
good.
Elaine. I appreciate that too. Someone else asked, you have tape digitized?
Everything's digitized.
Oh my gosh, that's exciting.
Nope. We find what's the first thing when we go over, we have this high volume copier that's sitting in a building that's empty because of COVID. We say, come on the weekend and tell me your list. So this week I have 3 texts that I'm supposed to digitize, and we do it based off of the immediate need, because you can't do everyone, but find the ones that are most needed and then put it into a shared file and put some controls on it to say, look, this is not meant to displace you buying a book. It's meant to make it so that sharing that book is easier. So we did CASAS, we did TABE. I mean, actually our partner in GED, they did all the TABEs. I said, you guys do that. You use them more than I do.
That's great.
And once a month, we have our Adult Literacy Collaborative. That's all of our adult ed partners across the county, and we get together and say, where do we go next? And that's how that virtual task force got started, was them agreeing upon it, because a literacy council by itself cannot walk up to the city and say, we need funds for a laptop loaning program. I mean, we had to walk with all the rest of our partners, and that's what's worked to grow our organization's capacity. And for navigators, we borrow navigators from across many other organizations. Adult Ed Navigator, they have 1, we have 3, Goodwill has 1, Michigan Works has 2. So that gives us a whole team of people removing barriers as opposed to just 1. And if you don't have any navigators, find someone who has them and align your services with them, so they can, for free, remove barriers to their services and yours, because they're the same barriers, right? You know,
Right.
They need transportation support. That's what Michigan Works. But if they can remove that barrier for them, they removed it for you just as well. So we spend monthly meetings aligning services, and that was the first thing I did 10 years ago when I was hired, was build that collaboration. 4th Monday of every month, Zoom call or as a WebEx call. Anybody? We found out zip codes don't matter. We have people from Philadelphia tutoring for us. Our COVID class, we had people from Florida, California, and New Mexico tutoring for us because zip codes don't matter anymore.
Love it.
So hopefully this has been helpful. I do appreciate your attentiveness on a Friday.
This has been great. Thank you so much.
It has. Thank you, Michael. Thanks for moderating, Emily. That's great. Appreciate it.
And it was
Happy
good to see you
Thanksgiving.
again. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving. Good to see you. Thanks again.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Someone here in the chat, Michael, said, thank you for being so enthusiastic.
He's so nice.
I love my job. I can tell you, I've worked in so many different places, nonprofit organizations, but when I found literacy and adult education, that's the best job ever. I love it every day, even on the hard ones. Sometimes especially on the hard ones.
I love it. You're so good at it. You have so much energy. I love it. I love it. All right. Well, I'm going to
have someone who is your advocate. And I consider myself a literacy advocate first. So you don't have one of those, get one. And if you don't have one and you end up being it, be a really compelling one, because no one's going to follow someone who doesn't believe in the mission.
Wonderful. Yeah. Wonderful. Okay. Michael, I have to hop to another call, but listen, I just want to thank you again. It's always a pleasure and I always learn so much. So take care.
You too, Elaine. I look forward to seeing you in person again sometime.
Yes, I do too. I miss all the visits. I certainly miss in person. Take care.
Bye, Elaine.
Bye, guys.
Goodbye. And thank you, Emily.
Yeah, thank you. We'll get this posted, however, who's in charge of doing this does this. And I appreciate you coming and sharing. And I think, there's a lot of good information in there that I think all of us can use. So.
Hope it can be put to use.
Yep.
It's working for us.
Thank you so much. Take care. Have a nice weekend.
You too. Goodbye.
Bye.